Hey, family, hope all is well. Glad to have you back for another Sunday series here. Last session we did last Sunday, we talked about the beginning of ministry and where it started for me. I wanted to kind of go to this next segment here. Again, this is your channel for co-work with me, and where we talk about the various lessons learned and how we've done things or how we are doing things. Maybe it helps you grow and build your micro business, your small business, your nonprofit, or your ministry. So last week I talked about the beginning for me. So let me just pick up where I left off. After I received the call to ministry and began to preach in my home church, this is before I was licensed to preach and before I was ordained, right? I began to preach regularly, and it was really uncommon in my church because we had a roster of preachers, mature men who have been licensed or ordained to preach. And so here I am telling my pastor, listen, I believe God called me to preach. I don't know what the next steps are. So my pastor opened some doors for me, and I began to preach at my church. And it did begin with the youth Sundays. But what started to happen was something beyond that, right? So I picked up an interest in homelessness, and it came by way of my work and what I was doing at the time. So I was in public housing, and on this particular day, and I think there was like a lead up where we were told that and I was in the missions department, we were going to do some major intake with families who were homeless. Now, in my mind, I only had one view of homelessness, and particularly in the city where I lived in Philadelphia, homelessness was specifically the visual of it was an individual sleeping outside on the street on the heated grates in downtown Philadelphia. That's all I've seen, right? If I go on downtown, and if you go downtown Philadelphia, you'll still see that, right? So that was the only perspective I had of homelessness. But when the day came, when we did intake, I was blown away by what I saw. And what I saw that day during intake was a bunch of people and families that looked exactly like me. And what I mean by that is these are individuals that didn't look like what homelessness was. They didn't look like the idea of homelessness I had at the time. These were individuals that were homeless because of circumstance, because of an emergency situation. Some people have had fires in their homes. Some people had domestic violence issues. Some people lost their job. Some people were going through addiction and dot, dot, dot. But they didn't have the look of homelessness. And that shocked me. It took me back. And I was early in my career. It took me back. And it dawned on me as I began to talk to these folks and hear their stories and start to get to know them. It dawned on me that I too am literally 2 seconds from being homeless, whether it's an emergency, whether it's a relationship change, whether it's a burning down of a home, loss of a job. We're just one paycheck away. And that became kind of a mantra for me, and it still is. Anything can happen that can cause a major disruption in life, and it brought a lot of sensitivity to me as I began to navigate those waters with those families and began to look at my life, my career, and then now my ministry. As I was beginning to kind of figure out what God is doing in my life. So because of that work experience, I began to have a heart for the homeless and begin to look around where I can serve. And lo and behold, near my home, my church home, was a homeless shelter that over the years, my dad connected our church to the shelter. And I was a young kid and didn't really know at the time, like the massive impact us partnering or volunteering or giving things away to this shelter meant. And then now here I am, an adult on my own and coming back to a place that I'd long forgotten. And so I began to meet with staff there and begin to serve and volunteer. And what started out as a conversation became a regularly scheduled Bible study or service that we hosted at the shelter. And we ended up hosting it at the shelter near my home church, as well as another shelter in Center City, Philadelphia. And between those two shelters, that became an introduction of what it meant for me to understand how to coordinate an entire ministry experience, particularly if we're looking to disciple people, introduce them to Jesus, lead them to Jesus, and baptize, right? Which is the whole point of the Christian faith, right? And then, of course, once baptism takes place, then you're brought into deeper discipleship as you go through life circumstances, and your disciple to understand how Jesus thinks, how Jesus teaches, how Jesus leads, and how his word impacts our lives and teaches us how to live, right? So all those things were taking place, and I began to see ministry differently. So there was the church ministry experience where, this is what happens when we're in church, and this is what most people are familiar with. And then there's the quote, end quote, church experience that takes place outside the church walls. And what does it look like to have church with folks who are not churched, in air quotes, right? And when you look at Acts chapter 2, there's a clear distinction and description of what church is. It's about coming together, fellowship, breaking bread, talking about the word, breaking up and doing it again. And the Bible says that he will add daily such as should be saved. That's the simplicity of church. Regardless of what you see today, regardless of the experiences you may have or the assumptions you may make, church is a lot more simpler than what we make it out to be. It has become this grandiose experience because of needs, and then after needs, then you have competition, comparison, keeping up with the Joneses, etc. And so that has created a false sense of what church is. A church is literally that simple. So we began to do, quote, church ministry, discipleship outside of the four walls. And it shaped me and changed me forever because I understood how to do church and how to be churchy. But now to be a disciple and leading men and women and family to Christ, it became the epicenter for me. What was beautiful for me as a young man who was preaching quite regularly and not yet licensed in my church, my pastor, who I give tons of credit for, he went on to be with the Lord. He opened the door for me to preach in the church house in a more structured, traditional setting, and then gave the green light for me to be out with the homeless. This is also a time where I started to coordinate our church members. I was not the pastor, was not the leader, but my pastor gave me the green light to coordinate church members to come and be with us. So whether it was doing worship, whether it was serving food, whether it was collecting donations, it was all a part of a coordinated effort. And of course, giving the word. Parallel to that, right? I'm preaching in the church. I'm preaching in the homeless shelter. I'm preaching in 2 homeless shelters. I ended up preaching, I believe I told you, around 50 to 60 sermons a year. All of this adds up, right? And so last week it was in part because of the number of services we had. The other part was because we were preaching outside. Now, let me add another wrinkle to the beginning of ministry for me. I also became very interested in the young men's ministry because it was dormant. It wasn't active. It was an opportunity to start to disciple young men that were coming up in our church and who were looking for something to experience. Again, my pastor opened that door and said yes, but he required that older gentleman be over us, and I said okay, and it was what it was. Couple of key lessons here from a leadership standpoint: you can't do everything on your own, no matter how much zeal and hunger you have. You're gonna have to have some oversight. And you're going to have someone, sometimes, as God may allow it, who's micromanaging you and holding you down so you don't do too much. Because if you do everything that you have on your heart to do, you end up doing a lot more damage than you intend. And then you realize, because you don't see the bigger picture of what's happening in ministry or in business or the infrastructure of the organization you're part of. I can say that now. I wasn't feeling that as a young man. But that happened, right? So now we're doing traditional preaching from the pulpit. We're doing outreach ministry with the homeless. We're doing young men's ministry. We're doing retreats with our young men and other men. We're doing events where we're inviting other churches. And it was this compounding experience of ministry that began for me once I said yes. And this lasted for quite a while before I eventually got licensed, and even after I got licensed by my church or ordination body, it continued. And that was critical for me to build the experience and a variety of experiences that has shaped me today, that continue to inform me, give me perspective. And while I don't use all of the tactics of my youth, a lot of the habits that I have formed that were affirmed by God, meaning that they worked and you saw the hand of God on it, and you saw others give feedback. Some of those things continue to play out today in the ministry for me. What I'll say for those of you who are starting, and I have yet got to the story of planting our church. The idea of planting a church and following God's voice is an important one. And I praise God if that's what God has called you to do. But what I want to share and what I'm sharing in this video series is how God may be building you up to that point, or what the building blocks may look like for you. It may not look like my story, because certainly my story is not the story of others, where others have had much greater and amazing experiences and head starts. But whatever God has released you to do in the season that you're in, embrace it. One of the things that I think is universal across all of our stories is the spirit and attitude with which we take on these opportunities to serve and to see what God is doing in our lives. If we take it seriously, if we embrace it, if we allow ourselves to receive what God is doing, and we're able to fully function with great joy and appreciation in what God is doing in our lives and the opportunities he gives us, we will find great lessons. We will find great opportunities. We will find great nuggets. We will see how God is establishing habits and behaviors that will last us a lifetime, or at least for seasons to come. You cannot poo-poo small beginnings. We have to appreciate small beginnings, because when you're faithful over a few things, that means you start to build the stamina and the capacity and the skill set to be faithful over greater things. You got to be thoughtful now about how all of these things in your life are linking together. Now, I talked about my pastor affirmed my call. He opened the door for me to preach. Then he opened the door for me to do homeless ministry, but homeless ministry was only coming into my life because of my work life and my work experiences that pricked my heart. And God clearly was doing a thing in my heart. And there were financial things and life things that were happening to me at that time. I was going through stuff that made me aware of what I became aware of. So this story is intricate. It's not just about these divine, spiritual, floating on cloud experiences. These are life experiences that are happening, and all of it ties together. So I'm going through life. Life was lifing for me at that time. My eyes were sensitive to other people's experiences, and when that work opportunity presented itself, I began to see my career different and my ministry different. And oh, by the way, my academic experience was different. It was at that time I was trying to enter into seminary, which did happen at a later date. But there were so many things happening all at the same time. And this is fascinating, right? And all that to say, God's hand was all on it, right? God's hand was on what was happening in my life at the time. I had enough awareness to know that, and appreciation to know that, but it's not always easy to appreciate the season you're in. So when I tell you, and I've told people that I've mentored, that if you're not sure what God is doing, look back over your life, look at the trends, the history, look at the doors that are open that are consistently the same doors. God is telling you something, that there's something there for you, whether it's something for you to heal from or something for you to lean into, because it's relative to the calling he has on your life. This is what I'm talking about. So this wraps up some of the early stages of ministry, and I'm sure there are tons of stories that I'm leaving out that are coming to mind now and will come to mind later. But the overarching concept has pretty much been laid, right? Opportunities will present itself. So how will you handle them as you begin to think about what it may mean for you to plant a church and to build a ministry so that you can, one, obey God and have an impact on the lives of other individuals that they may become disciples of Jesus Christ. I hope this series is blessing you. If you missed the first installment of, I don't know what we're calling this, but it might be something around planting, building a ministry, and what you might want to consider as we're continuing to populate our Co-Work With Me station here on this social media platform. Go back to the previous week before last Sunday and start to connect the dots, play this, and we'll see you in the next installment of this series.